It's the Bradfield Weather Podcast, underwritten by McAllen Construction. McAllen Construction, from the first dig to the last nail. I am Dan Lovallo. He is meteorologist Bradfield. We are putting this podcast together on Thursday, January the 5th, 2023. So a happy new year to you all. And Brad, here we are just taking a look at the weather headlines. First of all, happy new year to you.
Happy New Year, buddy.
Thank you. We're looking at the weather headlines, and I mean, you've got stuff going on in California. No snow, at least for now, at our end of the country. I mean, the grass in certain areas is green. What's going on?
Oh, Dan, it's ridiculous. I'll tell you, it's ridiculous. That's the word. January 5th, we are in the cold sector. Can you believe that? We are in the cold sector, and temperatures this morning are in the 40s. It's just kind of crazy stuff that's going on. The first quarter of this winter has been warm. I checked the climatology for the first 4 days of January. We're averaging more than 10 degrees above average per day. So for the first 4 days of January, it's been like spring. It's been warm. As you say, Dan, it's been snowless. Most of us had the 3 to 6 inch storm on December the 12th. But since then, there really hasn't been much in the way of resembling winter. And you know, I think most of the snow lovers in our listening and viewing audience would like me to say something inspiring. I will attempt to. The stratospheric warming event, the sudden stratospheric warming event that we spoke of on last podcast, is occurring. It is occurring right now. So there still is the chance that by the middle or the end of this month, we start seeing some really wintry conditions. So back it up again. We're at January 5th. So I'm saying maybe from the 15th through the 31st of January, we could start seeing some very wintry weather. I mean, it's going to try to be a little wintry during the day tomorrow, and in some places it indeed will be. But when you hear the forecast coming up for the next 5 or 6 days, you're going to say, that doesn't really sound much like New England winter to me, especially in the month of January, heralded as our coldest month. I did see a post from my friend and former colleague, Tyler Jankowski, who used to work with me at NBC Connecticut. He's now the chief meteorologist up in Burlington, Vermont, for the NBC affiliate up there. It's Burlington, Vermont, Plattsburgh, New York. And Tyler posted this morning that the water temperature of Lake Champlain, Dan, is 42 degrees right now. On the morning of January 5th, Burlington, Vermont, Lake Champlain is 42 degrees. I mean, it could be frozen solid across by this time. It should be frozen solid across by this time. There should be ice fishermen out there and so forth. So, you know, this winter has got off to a terrible start, but we will see. We talked about the sudden stratospheric warming event last week, and we talked about the fact that once it occurs, there's usually a 2 to 4 week lag before we see the cold air move down into our region. So it's underway right now. So that's why I'm thinking by the middle and the end of the month, things could change rather dramatically here, but certainly not tremendously in the next week.
Well, that leads us to our On the Weather Map segment. What is going on the weather map?
Well, I told you, Dan, we are in the cold sector. If you're a snow lover and it's January 5th and there's a low pressure system over Nantucket, you're saying, perfect. You know, the counterclockwise circulation around that low over Nantucket, bringing a northerly flow into Connecticut. If you have a wind vane or something in your yard, you can see that the wind is out of the north. the cold weather wind direction on January 5th, and temperatures are in the 40s. So there's just no cold air. We're going to see a little bit of light rain around today. Now, overnight tonight, the temperatures may ease back far enough to see that little bit of rain change over to a little bit of mist, or in some spots, freezing mist overnight tonight. So if you're doing any late night driving tonight, Dan, be aware of what your car thermometer is reading, because there is the possibility that there could be a few isolated slick spots later tonight. Now, for tomorrow, Friday, January 6th, we'll have an upper level low traversing New England. I do not think at the surface it will be cold enough to sustain snow accumulation over most of Connecticut. There is a caveat, though, Dan, out toward you. So we're talking Litchfield County, especially the hilly terrain of Litchfield County. We're talking the hilly terrain of Hartford County, so Burlington, up to Canton, up to parts of Granby. There could be primarily wet snow tomorrow. So it's snowing, but it's having a hard time accumulating. So I'll cut right to the chase. I can see you in the hills of Litchfield County and the hills of western Hartford County, and then likewise the hills of northeastern Connecticut. So you head up toward Union, for example, right at the Massachusetts border before you get to Sturbridge. Around there, and the hilly terrain of maybe Windham County. So you're talking your Summers and your Staffords and your Unions and so forth right across the top there. There could be 1 to 3 inches of snow accumulating there as well during the day tomorrow. So it's just a little sign that, hey, we've really had no winter since astronomical winter began on December 21st. I mean, sure, it was cold over Christmas, but I'm talking the combination of cold and snowstorms, or at least snowstorm threats, which we haven't seen much of. You're going to say tomorrow, maybe there is a chance for this winter, but really not a heck of a lot's going to happen. An inch or two tomorrow, maybe 3 in the highest hills of northwest and northeast Connecticut. So that's with that upper low traversing tomorrow. By Saturday, high pressure over the Appalachians, a weak cold front approaching. We'll see partly sunny skies on Saturday. Sunday looks nice. Sunshine. The high is like right over Messina, New York. So that's like upstate New York. So it's a nice day on Sunday. On Monday, there'll be a little bit of excitement on the weather map. There should be a big storm forming off the mid-Atlantic. But every computer model I have looked at today takes that thing east-northeast and out to sea. So if I were a betting man, which I have to be for this job, I would say that there is a very slight chance of anything coming in on Monday. I'm going to play it out to see. And then on Tuesday, we've got high pressure over North Carolina. It actually could be another mild day. And you'll say, oh, the days of winter are ticking away and we're getting these readings in the 40s and this is crazy stuff. But by Wednesday of next week, Dan, we have a strong cold front pass. Now, that cold front means some business, and I'll get to that in a minute when I tell you about the temperature predictions. But the strong cold front passes. We'll have a strong cold high pressure system over the upper Great Lakes region. So that's Wednesday and into Thursday of next week. And next Thursday, so in other words, a week hence, looks cold and windy in Connecticut.
Well, I know when you formulate your forecasts, you look at various models, and among the models you look at is the European model, and they have produced the temperature forecast. So what does that look like?
All right, the European temperature prediction, Dan, slightly cools us through the weekend. So it's a high of 44 today. This is for Bradley. High of 43 tomorrow. I think that's a little high. You'll see when we get to my forecast. I've got a little bit cooler tomorrow. I think there'll be dynamic cooling as the snowflakes and raindrops come down from the cloud. I think they'll mix some colder air down to the surface. So my prediction will be a little bit cooler, but the European has 43, 42 on Saturday, 38 on Sunday. So you see it's chilly on Sunday, but when you're heading toward the middle of winter, that is not cold. And then Monday of next week and Tuesday, as I said, there comes the warming again, 44 on Monday, 49 on Tuesday. By Wednesday, 42, but temperatures dropping. That's when the strong Arctic cold front passes. Now, next Thursday, the European high temperature is 20. So, as I told you, that midweek cold front next week means some business. So with a high temperature of 20 and windy, we're going to be rivaling the Christmas Eve, Christmas Day type feel out there. And then Friday, it's 30. Saturday, it's around freezing, 32, 33, something like that. So it looks like we may not have the look of winter later next week, but we sure will have the feel of winter by the middle and end of next week.
Now, because of this clipper, I guess, coming through on Friday, January the 6th, can you pinpoint any snow amounts?
Yeah, Dan, I'm thinking in western Hartford County. You head up toward Heartland and the places you start getting some elevation. Not so much Granby Center, but you head up into North Granby, West Granby, head down into North Canton, West Canton, West Simsbury, Burlington, those areas, and then on out toward Litchfield County. And of course, Torrington, but then the favorites up to your north, the Colebrookes and the Goshens and the Norfolks of the world. I'm thinking 1 to 3 inches of snow tomorrow, Dan, especially on the grassy surfaces. I'm not precluding the fact that there could be some slick spots on the roadways, but I don't think, especially with all the warm weather we've had lately, and the fact that this precipitation is occurring right in the middle of the day, I'm not so certain that there's going to be much impact on the roads. But I do see grassy surfaces and stuff picking up that 1 to 3 inches. And then skip over the valley, the places like Windsor Locks on up towards Springfield, and then down toward Hartford. Get out of the Connecticut River Valley. In the valley, I think we'll see rain and wet snow mixed. When it comes down hard, it could be in the form of wet snow, but I do think it will have a heck of a problem accumulating. I said I was going to go colder than the European numbers, but even my prediction for tomorrow for the valley, places like Hartford and Windsor Locks, is temperatures between 35 and 40. So even if it's snowing at 37 degrees, it's really going to have a tough time accumulating. But then you get up into the hills out toward Tolland County and up into Windham County in the hilly terrain, as I cited before, Summers, Stafford, on over toward Union. Those places are going to pick up, I think, 1 to 3 inches of snow. At this point, I favor the lower amounts, 1 to 2 inches, but somebody could pop a 3. But as I said, not a big deal. We're New Englanders. This is the dead of winter. Most people would, in a bad winter, would take 1 or 2 inches of snow in stride. But it's been such a anomalous winter this year that maybe it's going to seem like a big deal to some.
Okay. Well, before we put a lid on the podcast, anything else you'd like to add, and then we'll give our forecast.
Well, I told you off the air, the National Weather Service does these point forecasts, and I just did a random point here and there. They had for Granby, for example, 1 to 3 inches in West Granby, 1 to 2 inches in North Granby. Then I looked at you because I wanted to see what my friend Dan Lovallo is going to see at his house. It had a point forecast of 1.7 inches of snow for you tomorrow, Dan. So certainly that's a healthy covering.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to tell me next week how that point forecast did. at your location. But the only things I'd like to add, I would say, you're a sportscaster, Dan, and I know we talked about this briefly off air, but of course, prayers go out for Damar Hamlin, but I personally, as a human being, was so proud of Sean McDermott, the head coach of Buffalo, and Zach Taylor, the head coach of Cincinnati, saying, hey, that he knew the pulse of his players. They saw a horrific thing happen on the field of play, and they both knew that their teams could not play.
No question.
And, I guess the NFL handled it correctly. You said they have all the protocols in place and so forth, but I just thought that those men had the pulse of their team, and they had their players back. And, that was a horrific thing, but when you look at it, it was just sort of a normal tackle. I'm just so glad there was nothing dirty involved in that play. But so prayers go out there, and I would also like to again wish all of our viewers and listeners a very happy New Year, success, prosperity in 2023. Thank our sponsors again, and Dan, of course, all the best to you and Susan.
Well, I echo those same thoughts, and also the best to you and Sandy. So as we put a lid on things, again, we are putting this together on Thursday morning, January the 5th. So what does our forecast look like?
Well, we've got periods of light rain through the day today, Dan. Some mist, some drizzle, kind of just a raw, chilly day. Temperatures between 40 and 45. Now that mist and drizzle could freeze on some surfaces tonight. So I say watch your car thermometer if you're driving around late at night. I'm predicting the low between 32 and 37. Of course, if it's up around 37, you're less likely to get any freezing on surfaces. But if it's more down toward 32, maybe be a little bit leery when you see some wetness on the road, that it could be forming into some black ice. Now for Friday, January 6th, a period of rain and snow. Again, the Valley, southern Connecticut, rain occasionally mixed with snow. But the northwest and northeast hills that I outlined earlier could get 1 to 3 inches of snow, especially on the grassy surfaces. Saturday is partly sunny, but certainly not cold. Temperature between 37 and 42. Sunday is sunny and chilly. Temperature between 35 and 40 on Sunday. Monday, 40 to 45. Tuesday, up in the 40s. Again, it looks like that storm off the mid-Atlantic is going to go out to sea and miss us in the Monday and Tuesday time frame. Wednesday, we've got a Arctic cold front coming across, so we'll call it variably cloudy. There could be a sprinkle, there could be a flurry, but right now it looks like a dry frontal passage. 40, but temperatures tumbling. And then next Thursday, despite the fact that we have a lot of sun, we will also have a lot of wind, and it will be cold with a high temperature only around 20.
Okay. Well, we like to remind our audience, Brad, if people want an update, they can go to bradfieldweather.com. The forecast is updated on a daily basis. Also, that's one of the ways you can access the podcast, and we are also in all of the major podcast directories. However you get your podcast, just search for Bradfield Weather. And to you and Sandy and to our podcast audience, have a great week. We'll talk again next week.
All right, Dan, have a great weekend yourself.
Thanks, Brad. The Bradfield Weather Podcast has been underwritten by McAllen Construction, servicing the entire state of Connecticut. McAllen Construction, from the first dig to the last nail.